Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, the Gritty Broman. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
Today's podcast is with our good friend, Ryan Lampers. He and I sat down on a phone call just the other day. Still, he recorded the audio his place, I recorded mine, synced it up, so it's really clear. I didn't want to do Skype. I prefer, if I have the means to do that, to do it that way, so you have real clean audio. And it worked great. The video's not great, but the audio's legit. So he and I talked about elk hunting. Elk hunting is coming up around the corner, and I wanted to talk to him about last year's elk hunts and kind of how does Ryan do it? How does he find, because he killed 3 bulls last year with his bow during archery season, sucker, and makes it look easy. And so I wanted to know kind of, okay, how did you execute on all of this? The first half is kind of about where he hunts and how to find, what he does to find animals. The second part, more or less, is how did he pull it off? How did he kill? How did he get in close? One thing that you'll take away from a Ryan interview about any hunt is that patience and time. Those are 2 wicked effective tools that Ryan employs. Patience and time, both in terms of patience to find the animal, and then impatience in terms of when he decides to finally put a stalk on an animal. And he has enough experience that he can determine when the timing is right. He doesn't strike too early, and if he does, he backs out without ever being detected. It's a lot different than a lot of guys I know that hunt that are also successful. And the one thing, if you've listened to enough podcasts, hunted with enough guys, you'll start to see that there's so many different techniques. And some guys are really specialized on calling and do an incredible job pulling it off that way. Other guys never call. One thing I've learned is kind of know yourself, what your skills are. Also what the end game is. Are you looking for just any bull? Are you looking for a monster bull? Are you looking for a cow? Like, what is your goal? Just to put some meat on the table, or, and then of course you have constraints on area and vacation time and things like that for that kind of thing. So it's a great show. I hope you enjoy it. Let us know. Hunting season is fast approaching. So if you need some broadheads or an arrow delivery system, I'm using the X-Impact, Black Eagle X-Impact micro diameter shaft with the Valkrie broadhead at the tip. And you can save 5% at Valkrie if you use the code GRITTY there. And I can't say enough good things about those broadheads. I'm going to test another extreme FOC front of center setup going forward. I have a 2-blade design that I'm going to mess around with and see how it stacks up, compared to the Valkrie. The Valkrie, I love it. It's expensive. I love it. They are a lifetime broadhead, but check that out. Also, and I'll come back with some more results as I mess with some other broadhead setups. And then use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops. Use the code GRITTY at Sissy Sticks. Both of those are great partners of ours, and it's about that time of year. I like the Ignite. I like the new protein bars at Mountain Ops. Get yourself a pair of Sissy Sticks. Check those out. If you're doing a lot of hiking and scouting, 2 more products we added to our brand here. We really like the sheep feed inserts. They're orthotics. You can get them custom made, and they're perfect for these long miles and hikes that we're doing. I've been running mine now for couple of months, doing 5 to 6 miles a day, climbing it straight up, straight down. They've been a great addition to the boots, and I like those. And then the final one I wanted to mention today, as it is talking about scouting and elk hunting and all the things around finding elk and killing elk, you gotta go check out the Treeline Pursuits elk scouting course that Mark Livesey is put out. It's an incredible class. You can use the code GRITTY there. There'll be a link in the description field of the video. This class is worth every penny. Mark helps you figure out how to sync up your Google Earth, your Gaia, your OnX, and other tools. Tells you what to look for. Helps you figure out multiple routes in and out of an area, where you're going to camp. If this area doesn't pan out, then I'll go to this area. It's hugely beneficial. Use the code GRITTY there and save, and get yourself some e-scouting knowledge. It'll change your hunting forever. So check that out. And without further ado, let's jump into this podcast. Hope you enjoy. Stay gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast, folks. Today, my guest is Ryan Lampers, a.k.a. Stealthy Hunter. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing great this morning, Brian. It's early. I've got a nice fat cup of coffee in front of me. I'm ready to talk about whatever we're talking about today.
And it's the first few days of August. Getting ready for our hunting seasons to really kick off in the fall. And I thought it would be great for us to get together and just kind of talk about
what's coming up, right?
Prep, gear, maybe, what's coming up. First, I want to talk a little bit, though, about last year. Okay. So last year, you killed 2 bulls, archery, and 2 nice bulls. And
it was 3, actually, but
you sucker.
I didn't want to correct because I sound like an egomaniac, but it was 3. I was fortunate enough to get 3. I had 3 nice tags there. Yep.
That's right. I remember now. All right. So 3
in 12 days.
Bulls. That's right, because you took off for 1 and you did it in like a day, didn't you?
So started off in one of the great states out west here, and that was kind of an early trip, and that hunt was a solo hunt by myself and new country, desert-ish type country, open bowl, or like open terrain type stockable area, and I'd always wanted to kind of do that in this state, and man, what a fun hunt. It was cool. I ended up seeing, I covered a ton of country and quite a few days just to find where the elk were. It was, like I said, new terrain and nobody around. It was really cool, just bombing around and looking at sage flats and kind of coulee country where there's just little scrub patches here and there. And like I said, it was early. I felt like it was going to be a little bit of a struggle to get anything talking. And I did end up finding a group where it was like all of a sudden there was this pocket of bulls and there was cows and it was nuts. And I had a hard time sleeping because they were screaming all night long. Something that you would expect in maybe 2nd or 3rd week, even 4th week of September. But this was early first week. Beginning of first week, and it was already kind of a rut fest. And no, it was a ton of fun, and ended up going in and stalking this bull. He carried me a ways, and I had a storm come through, and I had to kind of sit down in the middle of this stalk and wait it out a few hours because it was just unloading this nasty sleety type stuff, and ended up getting that bull. And man, great big old 5-point heavy horned open country bull. So that was how my year started last year.
That was a pretty bull. What do you think was the deciding factor on that? I mean, what would you say is your walk away, something you learned or that is a tip for somebody that's heading out this year? So
I'll talk that bull specific. I haven't done a ton of open country stuff. I've started to couple of good hunts in Montana. But that country was neat because it allowed me to treat it like mule deer, treat those bulls like mule deer. It was kind of early. It was all about getting those vantages and glassing as much country as possible. So kind of what I learned on that is hunting those early season bulls in open country. It was just that eyeballs on as much country as I possibly could get and see, and then just having, I think, the fitness level to cover country, because it was miles upon miles upon miles out in that open stuff where I would go areas, large, distances without seeing a track or anything. And, a lot of the country looked the same. But once I started seeing one here, one there, you kind of go back to your mapping and try to duplicate that type area, how far the water is from this type brushy draw and rocks and stuff like that. And I ended up dialing it in. I'm not sure how many days in it was, 4 or 5 days of just covering country. And I think being diligent, again, having the pack on the back, not hunting from the roads, and even in that open country where it'd be really easy to just be bopping around on a side-by-side or a quad and glass from roads, but that's where you see the people, and that's just not that fun. So, just treating every hunt like a backpack hunt, like you're going into a wilderness somewhere. And even in those open country hunts where, you could definitely find an old single track or something to get a motorcycle in on. Just getting vantages and glass and then going as deep as you can, just finding those in-between points where you're just far enough away that people cannot see things for the spotters from trucks. And so that's what I did. That's how I treated it. I ended up finding just some really good pockets, and I got to pick out like which bull I wanted, which was really cool. There was quite a few different 5s and younger 6s and some good 6s. And the 5-point that I did find, he was kind of running the show in that basin. He'd kind of go back and forth. But I think one of the takeaways was sometimes you can leave your call in your pack. Sorry, Mr. Phelps, but treat those just like a mule deer hunt and go in quiet, and just, man, it is a ton of fun being able to sneak in on a big old bull. Now, again, and we always talk about this, Brian, but like one of the pieces I can't emphasize the most is having the days to put into a hunt where you're not limited, you're not pushing the envelope, you're not getting too aggressive, especially on a spot and stock, but having the days to sit back and watch until your opportunity comes, because I feel like that's the most important. And you don't have to be the best hunter when they put themselves in a rotten spot or a good spot for you, where you got a lot better chance of getting in on them. So,
were you worried about someone else bumping them before you could get in on them?
Not in this particular spot. I'd been there enough days to where I kind of knew there was just no people. I was seeing nobody. You were seeing trucks when I was driving the unit. Like kind of something I always like to do, right? Is when you get to a new unit, you drive the boundaries, look at all the access points that you've mapped out. Because you can't tell in your mapping, like maybe this is a popular trailhead. Well, you know where your access points are, but maybe there's 20 rigs and, 5 horse trailers, and probably not a spot I want to go into. But so driving the unit, you just kind of get a good feel for where the pressure is, where people are going in, where people aren't. And I'm looking for those places like we all do where people aren't, and then kind of getting the deepest in those type areas. So I really wasn't worried about people. It's more about getting those animals in an area where I could actually get an arrow in them. That open country can be tough.
I was going to say, we've talked about this before, whenever a subject comes up where people are in a rat race against other guys trying to kill the same animals, it's not your thing because you like to have the luxury of watching them and waiting for them to make that mistake. And in those types of hunts, you're forced to more or less move in, even though you don't really want to yet, or it's not the right time.
Having the ability to just be persistent and, again, not push the envelope and blow out a critter, whether it's mule deer, elk, or anything like that. And I'll say it a million times, if you watch them long enough, typically they're going to put themselves in a spot. And it's not always about your skill. It's if you have the time to do that, most likely they're going to end up in a spot where anybody can get in on them and probably get a shot. So I really like that luxury of you and I have done enough hunts where we always look for that 10-day. 10 days, that's what you like to carve out for a hunt. You always feel like you can get it done. Maybe take the first half of the hunt. It's all about learning a new area and figuring out where the pressure is and figuring out where the animals are. And then after that, you can really settle in and, kind of dial in a specific animal or a specific drainage and, have days to work and make sure that you're not going in reckless or having to because you're limited on your time. But no, that's definitely the one piece that, I think anybody, if possible, and work is always a struggle. If you have a job that limits your time, you just can't do it. And then you have to hunt. And there's definitely something to be said. I know the guys down your neck of the woods that hunt like the Wasatch and all that for mule deer. You got to have mad respect for guys that do that, because there's a lot of people. Like, there's people looking at almost every buck, right?
Yeah.
From what I hear. Now that is a whole next level type hunt, where those guys are, I think Kip and those type guys, they're so good, and they're finding ways to do it even though there's people all around, which is, very respectable. But
yeah,
I just like the solidarity, being by yourself, not worrying about other folks, and just letting the animal make the mistake.
Yeah. You covered some serious foot miles looking for this group of elk. Then, this was a get away from the roads kind of experience, and you had your camp on your back. And how many miles did you walk?
I'd say in that country, usually at the end of the day, you look at your GPS and you're doing a dozen miles or so. A lot of glassing, pretty hot days out there. Up and over, it looks like flat country, but there's a lot of coulees and canyons, and but you do put a lot of miles on. I would say on average, 10, 12 miles or so a day.
Because I know from hunting with you the past couple of years that when we are out, let's say, looking for bears or deer, and we're on foot and we're off the roads and there's nowhere to drive, I don't think people realize the amount of foot miles that are being traveled every day. You're like, oh, there's none here. Next spot. Nope, there's none here. Next spot. There's none here. There's none here. And it's a lot of miles. It's more miles in one day than a lot of guys will do in their 5-day hunt. And so what you're doing is, especially in that open country, was if they're there, they're there. You're going to see them. You're going to find them. If they're acting like elk, especially, you're going to find them, like rutting elk. And you put the boot leather to the ground, and then eventually, you find a big group. And I think a lot of times it's underestimated, the actual miles walked.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, and that's the fun of it. If you have the time and you've got, the physical ability to cover miles in that open type country, you're going to have some success, or you're at least going to get opportunities. You're going to get some stocks. But, just like on our bear hunts or mule deer hunts and whatever, it's hard to capture the in between. It's kind of boring. You don't really pull the camera out when we're covering miles. It's not like somebody wants to watch us hiking, but there is a lot of that doesn't really come through in the films. But you're always looking for those opportunity areas, and when one area just doesn't pan out, you give it a full morning, evening, or whatever type of animal you're hunting. Sometimes bears, it's second half of the day. You're covering that with your glass. Nothing pans out. Yeah, there may be 8, 9, 10 miles. You have to go look to another drainage that you've already pre-planned, and it's an area that looks promising, and you just do it. You don't think twice. You do it, and you get there. And sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. But more often than not, when you have a few of those places picked out ahead of time, and you're just willing, there's it's hard to explain the no quit attitude, mindset, whatever. It's just a drive. You can't ever let an opportunity go to waste. So if there is a possibility that, 10 miles away, there's a basin that you really feel like you need to get some eyes on, you just do it, whether that's a night hike or hot day hike or whatever.
I can remember hunts in years ago where, we're covering a 10-mile area radius, and we're just like staying there, and you can glass big parts of it. And it's like, no, you need to go 15, 20, 30 miles from some of these spots. I've learned over the years, especially with you, like, nope, there's nothing, we're not seeing anything here right now. It's time to pack up and move. And I think too many times people stay in the same spot looking for elk, and they're just not there. And so you're just burning days. No,
and that's where a good plan is so important. I don't think anybody explains it better than like old Mark Livesey. He's very good on his e-scouting. He's also really good about explaining how he does hunt plans. Now, we do them a little bit different, but I've had the luxury of listening to Mark at the summits and, just during his presentations. And we have the same approach in that we want like 5-6 spots picked out ahead of time, detailed. So you're not sitting in bed at night, like after a blown day of just not seeing any animals in your number one spot, like this is the spot. Instead of getting down and just sitting there at night and looking at your little tiny screen on your phone and you're like, man, now what do I do? Well, let's try to zoom in on this little basin. Well, that sucks. I'm sure everybody's done that. We've all done that. But if you've got spot number 2, and it was important enough that you put an X on it, and that's your second spot, well, you should probably just go there and feel good about it. And that just keeps you with a positive attitude, like you're looking forward to something, versus no hunt plan. You're just going to wing it. You're going to go by BARRELL with every step. It's kind of a recipe for, your mental fatigue sets in over time when you just don't have these areas pre-planned. So a good hunt plan, map work is pretty important, especially in new areas.
The thing that's fun about a hunt plan too, like that, is there's something about our DNA that wants to explore, discover new country, new places. Just the challenge of figuring out how to get to a spot from one to the next is kind of a fun challenge. And then seeing what that spot actually looks like pre-planned, because you and I will look at a map in a basin, we're like, wow, that looks really pretty. I wonder what's there. And that curiosity makes the journey there kind of exciting, because it's like you have this picture, but now you're going to see it in person. And there's something about seeing it and then putting it in your back pocket and just collecting these places that nobody goes to, one after the other, so that you have this whole vast knowledge of different states and different areas in those states that are yours now. Like, you kind of own it, and very few people go there.
Yeah, I think hunters are unique in that. Like, you always want to see what's on the other side. Grass could be greener or whatever, right? I've noticed a lot of, even in my family, if they're not super into hunting or whatever, they don't really have that drive to see that new basin and be able to look at it and dial it in and pick it apart and really learn it. Hunters are unique in that. There's an excitement that comes with, all right, well, I always got spot number 2. It spoke to me when I was doing my map work. So let's go there. That's exciting. And it's like this, you get re-energized versus you just are bummed out. Well, I guess I'll go over and check out this spot. I mean, it's not going to be as good looking as this one, but
I think Mark's e-scouting class, for people who are newer to looking up areas online, maybe you're not sure what constitutes a promising area. And if you haven't taken his e-scouting class, here's a shameless plug. You should go do that. There's a link below in this YouTube video. I'm sure you can find it on your site too, Ryan.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who has paid attention to Mark. There's a lot of people, even at presenters at the summit, we thought we were pretty dang good at e-scouting and using these different apps and whatnot. But there's not one guy that can go through Mark's course and not pick up a lot. You're not just going to be like, oh, I learned one thing. You're going to come away with it learning a lot. And it doesn't matter what presenter I've had at the summits. Every one of us tunes into when Mark talks, because he always comes up with new things. And it's, a shameless plug, but man, the guy deserves a ton of respect for helping out so many people with
he'll teach you what to look for, so you can find these 4 or 5 locations you're going to hit during the course of your hunt. If one's a bust, the next one, the next one, the next one. And if you follow what he teaches, there's going to be animals in one of those places. There's going to be. So
yeah, you
it's
got a
great
good hunt
course.
plan. You got the fitness behind you, a good attitude, and you got the days. I mean, that's a recipe for success, right?
So I've got little less than 12 minutes before I got to bounce off this call and go on another one. So before we do that, I want to get into. We didn't get very far, but we've kind of been talking about how you found this bull, how you got into this area after this bull. My next question is, how did you kill it? Okay, so a lot of guys can find elk. What they struggle with is deciding how to kill it. All right, and successfully killing it. How far was this shot? What was the wind doing? What time of day was it? Why did you decide to do it when you did it? Did you call him or did you just stalk him? And why did you, tell me this?
Yeah. So, from start to finish, how this day went was all night. I had backed my camp quite a ways off this basin where I ended up finding these bulls. I'd watch some bulls down the bottom, just tear up some brush and go through a wallow. It's pretty cool. And, there's like, I don't know how many bulls converged in this one little area that were it was like a little rut fest. And again, it was early in the month. And that night it was loud, Brian. I mean, a storm came through. When the storm was gone and the wind calmed down, the bulls were screaming their heads off all night long. And they didn't really cover a ton of country. They were just right across this giant drainage on the other side. So it was very, very noisy. Next morning, I got up and I got glass on them, watched them. It would have been easy, or it was like I could have just gone right in and tried to get in tight and try to make some calls, but it was so open. I felt like how this hunt was going to be best played out was just a spot and stalk. Let him bed up for the day. However long that took, try to keep eyes on him. That was going to be my best option. That's just what my gut told me was going to work the best. And so I did that, watched him. Well, unfortunately, they ended up, just cruising, feeding all the way up to the top of the far drainage, up and over. So I pull up my Onyx and I'm looking at it, and I can see there's a little patch of dark timber on the other side of that hill. I hadn't seen the other side of that hill yet. I'm thinking, well, I'm guessing that's where they're headed. I'll figure out what the wind is doing. Well, so I'm mid-route heading in that direction. Storm comes through and just absolutely obliterates me for hours. I just kind of threw a tarp over my head and sat under there and, waited it out. But it was just nasty storm. So then it changed all the wind direction, and they were kind of wanky for a while. I had to go back down the mountain, go around, and I kind of had an idea where they were going to bed, but I wasn't sure. So I got the wind right, made the decision to backtrack and go down a couple miles, and just so I didn't take any chances. Well, I got up in there, and it was just one of those. It was tall sagebrush and then open. And it was almost like still hunting. You're taking a couple steps and you're glassing the horizon, just trying to figure out, you don't want to miss, cow's ears or, a rack or something like that. You just don't want to blow it out. So I was real diligent about the glassing, and I went in, and fortunately I ended up picking up the set of antlers just over some sagebrush. And the wind was just perfect. It was blowing left to right. They weren't in that timber at all that I thought they would be at. They were well ahead of that. They were just in some tall sage. And, again, I think if you've done this enough, you get lucky on occasion and things just work out perfectly, because the bull was bedded off to the right side of this just kind of flat top, and the ridge kind of broke off just a little bit, and there was some tall sage that gave protection. The cows were off to his left, and so I jumped off to the right, skirted around, and after all that rain had just come down, all the balsam roots, leaves, which kill you usually on a stalk, usually in August and September, those balsam root leaves are just like firecrackers when you step on them, right? They're just so loud.
Totally.
Well, the rain had soaked everything, and it just gave me the perfect opportunity. I literally could walk in just how this country laid out, walk in and got within 50 before I had to get down. And I got in really tight, and I just was going to wait this bull out. Well, I kept kind of looking through the sage and trying to pick him up just a little bit. And the wind was ripping, so it also gave cover. But it was in spurts. And so arrow knocked, sitting there waiting. And, I ended up, I don't know how long I waited now. It's been a while, probably seemed like an hour, probably was like 20 minutes. And I could finally pick this bull up, and I saw how he was laying, and he was only about 20, 25 yards away or so. And I thought, well, I might be able to slip an arrow in. Even as he was bedded, it would have been a pretty good shot right into his vitals. And lo and behold, one of those cows ended up seeing me. It did see me. And as I had drawn and I'd stood up, a cow saw me. Well, he saw the cow, and he stood up and ended up slipping an arrow right in him, and he didn't go far, but it just worked out perfectly. And again, you dream about a scenario where a bull or a buck is bedded in a spot like that, where you got a good, a directional wind that's causing ground cover. We just had a blanket of rain, and just the perfect layout for where I could get in tight and get a shot on that bull. And it was just worked out perfectly. But I would have waited another 5 days to get an opportunity if he would have bedded in another spot, and just kept playing it until he gave himself put himself in a bad area. But I know that was the dominant bull. There was one other bull in there that he was a 6, but I don't feel like he was as old. I think they were pretty similar. But, man, you don't get opportunities at a big old giant 5-point with those big old splits in the end and heavy and dark like that very often. Right. And, man, I was pumped to get that bull.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a appreciated tactic here, is that you're willing to wait 5 more days or more to wait for that opportunity. I know, as we've been hunting together, and I've done this on other hunts where we're targeting a specific animal, whether it's on the ground or in a tree, we're often looking at the weather. Okay, what's the weather going to do? What's the weather going to do? Are we going to get some rain? Are we going to get some wind? And in the mountains, it's almost like I look back on people are like, man, I hate shooting in the wind. I'm like, yeah, but that's the best time. That's usually when I get my shot on an animal, because the wind is my cover. The wind makes so much noise. It's when it's
your
that blowing
savior in a certain country. I mean, you and I have seen the Coues deer thing down there. You feel blessed on a day when you get a good directional that's making cover noise, because that just allows you to get in tight. It creates movement. It creates noise. Everything you need to get in tight.
And the wind doesn't swirl. It blows hard in usually the one direction. Everything's to your advantage in the wind.
Absolutely.
So in Arizona, we're looking at days where we're like, well, this is a crappy day, crappy afternoon to try this stock. But 2 days from now, if we can just keep eyes on him for a couple of days and he keeps doing this, well, then, we're going to get some wind and some cover in here, and that changes everything. It's because it's so dead silent otherwise. And after watching that, it's been especially with a bow, that sort of getting a little weather and planning your stock around that, waiting for that to come, or a little moisture, like you said, with the ground being wet. You're kind of more or less just waiting for that moment where everything kind of lines up and you feel, okay, now's the time. I think the issue, though, at play for most guys is they aren't willing, or they don't think about the fact that they could relocate that animal day after day after day and wait for him to make a mistake. I think that takes a certain level of patience that most hunters I haven't seen display.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think you're right, patience or confidence that you're going to be able to pick him back up. Let's face it, there are times when you can't, like, they disappear on you sometimes. I I can think back to a Nevada mule deer, for example, where, gosh, I had the stock, you know, it blew up on me. I backed out, and then I was diligent daily to go back to that same basin, the next drainage over, the next drainage before that, back and forth, keeping eyes on this. Now, it was tempting to leave, but that buck was just beautiful. It was just the buck that I wanted to get. And it took 6 days of looking. 6 days. On the sixth day, that buck came back, and he plopped himself down in the exact same bed where I first stalked him on day one. But I just knew if I had enough time and spent enough days there, that confident that I would be able to pick him up. But, 6 days is kind of pushing the limits. You definitely start to doubt that you're ever going to see that animal again. But man, it's surprising how often it works out, and you are able to relocate that buck or bull, and it just takes diligence and I think confidence after you've done it a few times. Or, I know in the beginning years, you see a buck, you want to get on him so fast because you think he's just going to disappear and out of your life forever. I think more often than not, I think the more you've hunted, more experienced guys, they've realized you have more time than you thought, and you'll probably be able to pick them up. Now, obviously, I'm saying this in certain types of terrain. There's types of terrain that's not going to happen. You may never see that animal again. But the areas that we hunt, you'll notice we get good vantages, areas that you can see a lot of area, a lot of cover, a lot of terrain from one spot, and typically you'll be able to pick that critter up again. And where I was on that specific elk hunt, I felt like, well, there's no way I won't at least hear these bulls. They were so vocal. I will be able to find him if I do lose him, and probably get another opportunity. But yeah, I think confidence comes with experience, and the more times you lose a buck and you're able to pick him up next day or the day after that or the day after that, over time you just kind of build this into your system and realize it'll probably happen again. You'll probably be able to relocate him. Right.
Something you touched on a minute ago, I totally agree with too. I really learned this on a few hunts like Alberta and New Zealand, that there is terrain that is highly conducive to killing an animal if there's an animal within that terrain. It's like, dude, if an animal walks in this, it's like a kill box. Like, I can do it here. Or there's that gem of an animal that you're hunting in some of the most impossible terrain, and where it's like your odds of completing a stalk in that area is so low. And it's like, okay, where do you invest your time? And I've watched you choose to invest your time in very stalkable areas rather than areas that you kind of intuitively know, or maybe it's experience that that's kind of a fruitless place to try to kill them.
Yeah, for sure. And, thinking back to the early days, listening to guys like South Cox, South was always very open about why he hunted certain places, right? Stickbow guy. He always put himself in areas where if he was locating bucks, he's probably going to have an opportunity at them. He's not hunting areas where you're going to see a lot of bucks and they're just going to be in unstockable places. He chooses to put himself in those places where he's got a high percentage if they're there. I've kind of fallen in line with that. I like having opportunities when you see them. So when you're hunting thick cover and there's like just a couple openings here and there, now maybe that works with the rifle, and it's a worthy spot to try for with the rifle. But there's areas where with a bow, it's just almost not worth hunting at all. I mean, you can glass up animals all day long, and they're moving through, openings on a mountainside covered with timber. But where's your play? Like, maybe think about that before you sit on a vantage and are just looking at it. Where you expect to see animals. Is there even an opportunity to make a stalk? If not, I'd say probably look for another mountain or another type of terrain.
And I've watched you. Another thing that you do is when you sit down and you're looking in an area, let's say you're waiting for the evening to come to see what's going to pop out and what's not going to pop out. You pretty much have in your head throughout the day, afternoon, morning, whatever, you have gone, okay, if there was an animal here, this would be my approach. If there's an animal here, this would be my route. If there's an animal here, 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 here. When we went after that bear in our one of our later films, we had a swamp and a river to get past. You already had in your mind, if I see a bear here, this is how I would get there, because you're using your maps. And so you're basically acting as though
damn grizzly got in our path though on that one.
Yeah, right. But you have in your mind, oh, there's an animal there. If there was an animal there, these are my routes, and everything's pre-planned. And without that, there's a lot of animals we wouldn't have killed or gotten in on, because if you had to take the time to figure it out after they've been spotted, then you wouldn't have had the time to do the stalk. So you're always envisioning, your route if you saw an animal come through the place you think they might come through. Some of that just takes experience, but pre-planning all that, thinking ahead, envisioning.
Yeah, I think so. I think over time you just learn to avoid hunting places where you're just not going to get a stalk, or it's only going to be 1,000-yard shot if you do see one, and there's no closer shot than that. We're just not going to take that. But yeah, I think with experience, you tend to put yourself into positions where you actually have a chance to kill them.
I know some of our favorite spots, like on the mule deer hunts, it was like almost everything we wanted to kill was accessible in a 360, with the exception of one area, one like 300-foot cliff. With pretty much, if we saw something, there's a way to get to it within 30 minutes or 40 minutes, even though it's a couple thousand yards away. Like everything, and which makes it a really lethal place to hunt, because basically, if you have so much visual area to cover, but if you can find something, most of it can drop. There was a couple animals where we saw, like one real nice one that we never did get, where we're like, how do we get there? And it wasn't really gettable, but for the most part,
yeah, it was just going to take us some time for sure. It was like the one spot in that area, but you're right. Places like that where it's just now be diligent with the glass, because if you see him, you feel like you're going to get him. Like you're so confident. There's no doubt we're going to get this. Unless time runs out at the end of the day, lose light or something like that, or fog rolls in, which happened to us on occasion too. But, yep.
Well, right on, Ryan. I got to roll. We got another call, but I thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm going to publish this right away. I know people are getting stoked for the season to come. We have lots more we could talk about, so I feel like I barely even got to ask you all my questions, so let's do this again real soon.
Well, 'tis the season. We got a lot of big hunts coming up. I'm excited. Everything's getting food's getting made, gear's getting packed up, ready to roll. So we're close.
Question for you: I got some messages about your gun covers. How are those coming along?
Oh man, it's been a struggle, Brian. So we got so many orders when we pre-sold those that we fell behind. Like surprisingly, a lot of orders. And so with COVID and everything else, the materials were tougher to get. The manufacturing is proven to be very slow. And so we are really close to catching up, but I just got my latest batch in, and somehow, some way, the wrong buckles were attached. So I've got new buckles coming in tomorrow, and I will be reattaching and getting those right out. So the plan is by the end of this week, if not mid next week, we are all caught up and we will be selling gun covers again. But man, apologies to those who have ordered them ahead of time. We're 2 months behind is what we've been dealing with. And COVID sure didn't help getting the materials.
Right. If guys do order a gun cover now, can they get it before, you think they'll get it before October?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. No, I think I've got some big orders coming. I think now we should be really caught up by the end of this week, if not mid next week. And by all intentions, I will make sure they get their cover before rifle season.
Yeah, it's a learning curve. We're figuring things like this out. I know you've this is one of your first coming to market with a product that you've designed or that you're part of, and you part of testing and
no, it's been eye-opening.
The whole order,
I had no idea the response that guys would take to them so well. I mean, you and I have been using them, and they're great, but guys have really supported us on this, and I feel bad for not being able to just get the order and get it shipped right out. But slowly but surely, we're trying to make it better, figure out the manufacturing a little bit better, so we have a shorter time in between getting them shipped. But we're working at it every day. Big shout out to everyone who's been patient. I've got it. I'm sure you've gotten plenty of emails, but others too that put in their orders a while ago and they've been waiting. We're not a culture and a society that's really accustomed to having to wait very long for things we want. And really, you shouldn't have to wait 8 weeks to get a cover either. It's just not acceptable by any stretch. But
like Alpaca Raft, they told me they were 6 to 8 weeks out. I'm like, that bothers me. Like, I want it now. Like, I want a raft tomorrow. So it's really hard when you get bombarded with new orders. I think these are things that, production, when your product is in high demand, everything changes overnight, and trying to find resources to catch up with that is not easy. And then what happens if demand dies down and now you've ramped up all your production? It's like, okay, now I have more bills to pay and more. It's so hard, and you don't, as a new kind of manufacturer seller, it takes a little time to figure that out. So
yeah, and when you start, you're really unsure how many of these are going to sell, and then when you get hit with these major orders, it's like, well, dang, I don't have the sewers to make them fast enough. And me and Christian from Western Binds, we've been trying to negotiate this and figure this out, and yeah, we lost some sewers in the beginning, which is the worst time to lose them because we got all these orders.
Right.
We feel like we're catching up now. But yeah, quite a struggle, but I think we're getting it dialed now, and guys will be getting their covers. But yeah, I've noticed that, Alpaca Raft, even Seek, the lead time right now after COVID has really jumped up, and it's got to be frustrating for the consumers.
Right. Absolutely. So, big thanks to everyone who's been patient. All right. Let's do this again real soon.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Take care. Later.